Hi everyone, welcome to Miss Adams Teaches Poetry. In today's video, we're going to be looking at a poem called Search for My Tongue by Sujata Bhatt. This is an absolutely phenomenal poem that is all about a woman's need and desire to reconnect with her own language. Sujata Bhatt was actually born in Gujarat in India, but moved to the United States when she was 12 years old. And so through her life, she found this kind of conflict between her original language and then her developing language, speaking English, to be a sort of reflection of the struggles to do with cultural identity. And this poem explores that in full. I'm going to do an annotation for you, which is going to focus on obviously the content and the meaning, but we're going to have a detailed look at language, structure and form as well. Before we get started, little plea from me, if you're finding these videos useful, do please subscribe to the channel because it is great helpful for me, and also it means that you get notifications of when the next set of videos are available to you. But for now, let's get on with the poem. So you can see here from the title that we're introduced to some of the emotion and some of the tone of this poem. The fact that it is a search for my tongue suggests a kind of desperation, a need to rediscover something that is lost. Tongue here is of course a metaphor, and in its first way it's about language. It's a metaphor for language, so she's searching for a language that she has lost, but actually it has wider implications about cultural identity. So immediately the title gives us a lot of knowledge in advance of what this poem is going to be about. Let's have a little look at the opening of the poem. You ask me what I mean by saying I have lost my tongue. Notice here we've got direct address, okay? The writer is specifically talking to a reader, and there's a suggestion that this is going to be answering a challenge in some way. There is a kind of sense of defensiveness in the tone. You ask me what I mean by saying I've lost my tongue, like someone doesn't understand this speaker's position. Lost my tongue here is again, of course, a metaphor, but it's got a couple of different interpretations. Okay, you can say lost my tongue if, you know, if someone's lost their tongue, it means like unable to speak, yeah, unable to communicate. So that might be to do with language barrier, yeah. And if that was the case, then the tone of the person that the writer is addressing, I mean, that would be quite unkind, you know, making a comment about, oh, you know, what's going on, you've lost your tongue because someone is struggling to communicate because of a language barrier. That would be quite unpleasant. The other way of looking at it is about loss of language through disuse. So in this case, it's about just a kind of lack of understanding. So we've got you ask me what I mean, and then I ask you. So note the way that the structure is parallel. Yeah, so you get this idea of a back and forth dialogue or debate between the writer or the narrator of the poem and this you know, person that they're arguing. I ask you, what would you do if? So note here we have a kind of hypothetical analogy, and this is about asking for understanding. Yeah, so it's like, well, hang on a minute, put yourself in my shoes, asking for that understanding. If you had two tongues in your mouth, again, we've got this extension of the metaphor. Okay, I'll write that, extended metaphor, continuing the idea of a tongue meaning language, and lost the first one, the mother tongue, and could not really know the other, the foreign tongue. Notice here, this is about familiarity. Yeah, it's a bit of a dead metaphor, maybe an idiom, the idea of the mother tongue, but it comes from the fact that it's your roots, isn't it? It's your heritage. It's your mother tongue because it came from your past. whereas the foreign tongue is all about unfamiliarity. Yeah, so you could also see it as old language versus new language. Yeah, I'm shortening it by saying lang. I hope that's okay. Okay, so this is the hypothetical analogy. Well, what would you do if you had lost your mother tongue, but you're never going to get comfortable with the other tongue? So this is, again, this sort of sense of discomfort, not fully having a proper grasp. Let's just scroll down a little bit. You could not use them both together. So again, note the direct address. This again, continued conversation. You could not use them both together, even if you thought that way. So that's sort of thinking in two languages. But even if you thought in two languages, no one would understand if you sort of combined them in your speech. And if you lived in a place, so again, continuing this idea of the conditional, so creating further hypothetical situations. I hope my handwriting is neat enough for this. Just about. And if you lived in a place you had to speak a foreign tongue, so note again the repetition of that metaphor. Your mother tongue, continued juxtaposition, which is what we had up here, yeah, as well. Your mother tongue would rot and die in your mouth. Okay, so we've got an incredible emotive metaphor here that suggests it's not just about disuse, it's almost like a decay, yeah? It's not just it goes away. In some ways, that language is then spoilt for you. And note the repetition of the verb. Rot. Okay, so again, it adds emphasis. It's more emotive. If you want a fancy term for this, this is called anadiplosis. Okay, and that's when a term or a word, is repeated at the end of a structure and then again at the beginning of a structure. So that anadiplosis creates further emphasis on that verb rot, which again is about this, decaying of language. And then look how it escalates. To dying in your mouth. There's something very personal about this. You know, this idea that it's your language, it's where you came from, it's what you used to have and be, and it's dying in your mouth until you had to spit it out. Note here, we've got wonderful onomatopoeia, and that is largely due to the consonants. Okay, so consonants is when you've got repeated consonant sounds. It's slightly different from alliteration, because alliteration is when those sounds are at the beginning of words. But here, it's actually at the end, isn't it? Spit it out. And those sounds are very, very plosive. And that's another thing that creates the onomatopoeia, because you actually imagine it's so vivid, this idea of spit, spit, spit. And then look here. We've got repetition. Sorry, almost misspelled that. But note as well, we've now got uncertainty, because it's like, well, hang on a minute, I thought I spit it out. So there is, maybe this is a sense of uncertainty. Maybe this is a sense of fear, that she feared that it was gone. Because once something has rotted and died, and then you've spat it out, that's, you're gone for good. However, overnight, while I dream. Now, the fact that it's in dreams is really important, because this is, of course, your subconscious. So it's this idea of it, the language, I'm going to shorten that, being rooted within you. It doesn't go, It's just been buried. Okay, I'm just going to move on to the second page. So excuse me here. Now, check this out. This is marvellous. Okay, so the second stanza is written in the mother tongue. So this is all written in the mother tongue. It's called Gujarati script. Okay, so what you'll notice, okay, so this line is the Gujarati script, and this is the sort of phonetic translation, which means that as a reader, you're able to have a go at saying the words. So this is about asking the reader, this is so clever, to experiment with a foreign tongue. Okay, now obviously at this moment in time we don't know what this means, but this last bit here, believe it or not, is a translation. So once we have experimented with a foreign tongue, it comes back to our mother tongue so that we can understand. So helps us to understand. Now, before we look at this last stanza, I want to draw your attention to some structural analysis, because structurally, so I'm going to put this up here, structurally, this is the center of the poem. And of course, this is symbolic, yeah, because it's the idea about the mother tongue being in the center of the narrator, yeah, so mother tongue in the center, or like in the heart of the narrator. Okay, well that's good, and that makes sense. So let's just look at the final stanza. Okay, so what we have, it grows back. So of course it is the mother tongue, yeah, so it's the mother tongue growing back. A stump of a shoot. So this is about beginnings, yeah, it's about development. But you'll notice the word shoot is obviously a metaphor, yeah, and it makes it sound like a plant growing, and that makes sense with the word grow as well. So a shoot growing, like a plant growing. Now look at this, grows longer, grows moist, grows strong veins. So you can comfortably just call this repetition of the verb, yeah, which shows that it is an ongoing process. So it just keeps on going, grow, grow, grow. If you want a slightly fancier term, you can call it anaphora, because anaphora is when a word is repeated at the beginning of a structure. So grows longer, grows moist, grows strong veins. So again, we've got an extension of the metaphor. It makes it sound living. Again, it's the idea of the plant and nature. There's something very organic about this growth. Okay, it ties the other tongues in, the other tongue in knots. Obviously, it's another metaphor. This feels a little bit more confrontational, doesn't it? Like it's a battle in some way, a battle between the tongues. And notice the way that you've got alliteration and consonants here. Again, that plosive sound that perhaps adds to that confrontational tone. But then there's a contrast in tone here, because we go back to the extended metaphor of the plant, in this case being a flower. Yeah, the bud opens in my mouth. So it's almost like this almost like wonderful revelation, just like a flower opening. So the language develops and blossoms and pushes the other tongue aside. Got a little bit of personification here. And the other tongue is, of course, the foreign tongue. So in this battle that we were talking about here, the mother tongue has won. Yeah, because that's the original, that's the root, you know. Every time I think I've forgotten. Okay, so the fact that we've got every time, this adverb here, adverb of time, suggests that this is an ongoing struggle that she has. Every time I think I've forgotten, I think I've lost the mother tongue. So note the way that she explains what she means. I've lost the mother tongue. It blossoms out of my mouth. So we've got the final metaphor. And again, it's the plant flower image. And, you know, this actually, blossoming out of my mouth, yeah, it's a metaphor for the plant of flower, but this is also about speaking it, isn't it? It's speaking the language. And note how positive this verb in this metaphor is, blossoms. It makes you think of colour and brightness and new life. So by the end of the poem, the narrator, who we can assume is Sujata Bhatt, is almost like celebrating the fact that that mother tongue is not lost after all. Right, I hope that discussion of language and structure was useful for you. In terms of form, obviously it is worth noting that this is in free verse, yeah, and obviously you want to look at the mid stanza in Gujarati, because that is such an interesting feature of the form that, you know, not many poems have. I think when you're talking about the free verse, I think it's about the kind of freedom of expression and the kind of developing language. It makes sense that it is in free verse rather than being in a strict structure. That's it from me on this poem. If that was helpful, do subscribe and check out my other poetry annotations coming your way. If this is for your IGCSE exam, very, very, very good luck to you all. Thanks so much for watching. Happy revising.